So as I told you in the last video that now we are going to set up our socket handlers. Okay. So let's now start with our disconnect handler. Okay. So what's going to happen when a user disconnects? First of all, we should know what is going to happen when a new user is connected. Okay. So when a new user gets connected, we are going to simply let's take a look at our models. And here we have our user model. There are two properties that needs to be updated whenever a user connects to our socket server. So the first property is status. It should be set to online when a user gets connected. And also we are going to get the socket ID and we'll update that inside the user's document because we are going to need the socket ID in order to emit the event to the user. Okay, using socket ID. So here inside our new connection handler, first of all, we should create a simple function. So let's write that this is called new connection handler. Okay. And let me know if the voice is low because right now I'm streaming. Okay. And this video is also getting recorded. So I'll try my best to fix the audio right now. But since I already have the recordings, so I'll be, posting it again after fixing the voice. So let me know if you have any doubts, okay? Or you can also comment anything, okay? Like any doubt you have, or if you just want to ask any question related to the application, just ask me in the comment section. Now, let's get back to this one. We have created our new connection handler, and we're going to get two things over here, the socket and the IO. Now, let me tell you that first of all, we should actually export this function. So at the end of this function, I'm just going to write module.exports equals, and this will be equal to new connection handler. Okay. Now, what is going to happen over here? I'm just simply going to write the function body. Okay. So whenever a new connection is established, first of all, since we are, passing our socket through the middleware is this one, auth socket, and this auth socket is going to give us this socket.user, which means the decoded property will be attached to the socket event, socket instance on this property user. So I'm going to write over here socket dot socket.user, and from this we can extract the user's ID. Okay, so here I'm just going to write user ID. This is what we have inside our decoded object. Okay, so we have extracted that. Now what we are going to do, first of all, let's log something inside the console. So here I'm just going to write that log new user connected. So this is an event that we have cached successfully, so I'm just going to console log it. So let's write console.log, and here I'm just going to write user connected. Let's also log the user socket ID. Okay, so here we can just write the socket ID by writing socket. On this instance, we can access the ID property using dot ID. Okay, now the next step is to add socket ID to the user record and also set the user's status to online. So here let me write the comment for that. I'm going to add the socket ID to the user record. Okay, add the socket ID to user record and set status to online. This is what we're going to do when a new user gets connected. So here I'm just going to write const user equals, okay, and then let's write await. Okay, since we are using await inside this function, so let's also mark it as asynchronous. Okay, so here I'm just going to get the user model. Okay, it will be auto imported from model slash user, and on this I'm just going to execute find by ID and update. So let me write find by ID and update, and here I'm just going to use this user ID in order to find the user document. And after that, what we want to update is this user's socket ID. So let's write socket ID, and the socket ID will be equal to socket.id. And also we want to update the user's status to online. So let me just write status online. Let me actually remind you about a very important thing over here, that if you take a look at the user model, then you can see inside this status, we have defined enum, which means this model can only have two possible values for this status field, which is online or offline. By default, it was set to offline. Okay, by default, it was set to offline when the user was created. Okay, and when the user basically gets connected to the socket server, we are setting it to online. So please make sure that you are using the exact same, this string that you have defined inside the enum. over here. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Then what we are going to do over here, after we have updated this, I also want to specify that I want to get the new user document. So let me write new true, and over here I'm going to write validate modified modified only. Okay, so this means we are going to get the this user will be the result after the update has happened already, and all the fields will not be validated once again. Only these two fields which we are updating, the validation is only going to run on these fields. So this is our user, and now I'm going to check a condition. If we have the user, okay, then we are going to broadcast to everyone that the new user just got connected. So let me write in the comment, to everyone, broadcast to everyone, the new user connected. Okay, we are going to basically notify everyone about this event. But in the else case, when we don't have the user, that means there is something wrong with the user ID, okay, or something else, happened wrong. So in the else case, I'm just going to write console.log, and over here, I'm just going to, log a error. So let me write user with ID, and let's, write the user ID, which will be user dot ID, not, no, not the user dot ID, but this one, because we don't have the access to user, so I cannot write user dot underscore id. So let's write this thing, user with this id not found. Okay, so that will be the error that we are going to log inside the console. But inside this if case, how we're going to broadcast, let's see. So here I'm just going to write socket dot broadcast. Okay, so on this socket we can have this we have this broadcast, and on broadcast we can just write emit, and here we're going to write user dash connected. This is the event name that we are going to listen for on the client side. So user dash connected, and whenever we emit an event, we can pass some data as the second argument. So this curly bracket, this object is going to contain the data. Here I'm just going to write message, okay, that we want to basically send to the user. So the message will be user, and then let's actually write the user's name, user dot name has connected. So you'll actually see this inside the console. I'm going to show you everything. Then the user which got just connected, we're going to give its ID. So that will be user dot underscore ID. And then the status. Since the user just got connected, so the status will be online. So this is the data that we are going to pass to the client side. Okay. So you understand how this new connection handler is going to work. It's going to get access to the socket.user property from the auth middleware. And after that is done, we are going to extract this user ID property from the user that we got from the socket instance. Then we are logging inside the terminal that user with this socket ID just got connected. Then we find the user's document with their ID, update these two fields, socket ID and status, and we return the new document after the updation has happened. If we have the user defined, then that means we are going to broadcast the event, which is user connected, to everyone with this data. Otherwise, we are going to log this error inside the console. And at the end, we are just simply, exporting this function so that we can use it inside other files. So that is our new connection handler. Now, just opposite of this is going to be the disconnect handler. So let's now create our disconnect handler function. Let me see if there are any questions in the comment section. Okay, so there are no questions in the comment section right now. So I'm just going to continue with disconnect handler. So let's write over here const disconnect handler, disconnect handler. Okay, and this is actually going to be an asynchronous function again. We're going to get the socket instance over here. Okay, then here what we are going to do, we are first of all going to log the connection. So let's write log the connection, log the disconnection, actually not connection. So let me write this connection. Okay, then what I'm going to log over here, let's just write console.log, and then I'm going to write user disconnected. Okay, user disconnected, and then let's write the socket id, socket.id. So user with the socket ID just got disconnected. Then the next step is to update the user document. So here I'm going to write update user document. Now what we are going to update this time, we are going to set socket ID. We are going to set socket ID to undefined. Okay. So we are going to set the socket ID to undefined and status to offline. Okay. So this is what we are going to do. Now let me tell you that what we are going to do over here. We can just simply write await user dot. Okay. Find one and update. This time I'm using, a different method. This is called find one and update because this time I don't have the user's ID, so I'm not going to search user by ID. I'm going to search it with their socket ID. So let me just write over here. Inside the first argument, there will be filter. So I'm going to specify the socket ID, and that socket ID must match this thing socket dot ID. So let me search for a user with this socket ID. And if we found a match, then what we are going to do, we are going to set the socket ID to undefined. Okay. And also we are going to set the status to offline. Okay. And as usual, we are going to, since we are making an update to the document and we also want to, use the result of this query. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm getting the latest document. So let's pass new true so that we get the document after the update has happened. And also I'm going to set the validate modified only property to true. So validate, let me correct the spelling, validate, again same mistake, validate modified, oh, I'm sorry, validate modified only. I'm actually making lots of spelling mistake right now. So this is, written, the query is written, and now we are going to get the updated user as a result. So let me write const user equals to this thing. Okay. And there is one more thing. This user is a model and we haven't imported it. So let me just write user and it will be imported from model slash user. Okay. Otherwise, this query is going to fail if you don't have the correct import placed over there. Okay. So now after we have the user, again the same thing is going to happen. We are going to check if we have the user or not. If we have the user, then broadcast a message that means emit an event. Okay. Otherwise, we are going to just simply log the error to the console. So let me just take help for that thing over here. I'm just going to copy this if else from new connection handler. Let me paste it inside this connect handler. We are just going to check user. If we have the user, then what we are going to do, we are going to broadcast to everyone. So let me write broadcast to everyone except the disconnected user. So except the disconnected user. Okay. So please understand what is happening over here. When we are writing socket.broadcast, this is going to broadcast an event to all the connected sockets except the one which is the current socket. So the disconnected user, apart from that, we are going to send the event to everyone. Okay. And then we'll handle the event on the client side. So broadcast to everyone except the disconnected user that the user has gone offline. I hope this is, easy to understand because I'm trying to break things down into, simpler parts for you. So here, socket.broadcast.emit, and I'm just going to, change the name of the event that we are emitting. I'm going to call it user disconnected. This time I'm going to say user and then username has disconnected instead of connected, or you can also write has gone offline. Okay, whatever you write over here, that's your choice. And then we are going to just give the user ID that is just disconnected, and also we are going to give the current status that will be offline. Okay, then here the same thing is going to happen, but this time we are not going to log the user ID. Instead we are going to log the socket ID. So let me write user with socket ID, and then here I'm just going to write socket.id not found. So if we don't find the user, if the user is undefined, then that means the user with this particular socket ID is not found inside our database. Now you see this disconnect handler is created, but we are not using it anywhere. So I'm just going to, export it from this file. So let me write at the end module.exports, module.exports, and that will be equal to our disconnect handler. Okay, I hope this is clear till this point. Now, after creating these handler functions, let's see how we are going to, use them inside our socket server. So inside my socket server file, I'm just going to call the new connection handler over here. So let me write new connection handler, and you can see already that it's going to be imported from socket handler slash new connection handler. Now inside this, we need to pass two things, socket and IO. So here I'm just going to, write socket comma IO. This socket is coming from this, connection. When we are creating this callback, we are going to get the socket, current socket, and the IO is this one. So we are just going to, pass these two things to our new connection handler, and you can see here we are using those things. Okay, actually we are not using IO, so you can also remove that. But I have just shown you that you can also pass that. Okay, if needed. So I'm just going to remove this to do from here because now this is in the done state. So let me mark this one as done. Okay, new connection handler. Then let's also connect the disconnect handler over here. So when the disconnect event happens, we are going to call disconnect handler. So let me write disconnect handler from socket handler slash disconnect handler. Now inside this we need to pass the socket. Okay, and there will be no data coming from the client side. So this is going to remain empty. Okay, this parenthesis. So now we have also attached the disconnect handler in the appropriate place. So let me also mark this one as done. And now you see there is a difference between these, and it's because of this special syntax. If I add dot star star, it's going to be highlighted. And let me also tell you the extension that I'm actually using. It's called better comments. Okay, it's going to improve the code readability. You can write different types of comments for different purposes, and you can just read about it in the documentation. It's a very good package. I use it in in my VS code for all of my projects. Now after that, after this thing is done, we also need to create other handler functions. Okay, so I'm just going to, create this start typing handler first. So let's see how we are going to handle this event when the user starts typing. So here, first of all, without thinking much, we should create our, function. So let me write start typing handler. And this is again going to be a simple arrow function. Okay. Inside this, we are going to receive actually three things. Let's pass the socket, the data coming from the client side, and also IO. So what we are going to do over here, first of all, we are going to get some data from the client side. And let me tell you what that data is going to contain. That data is going to be an object which contains two properties. And those two properties will be the user ID and the conversation ID. So let me explain you why we are, getting these two fields from the user side. This is because this conversation ID is the conversation in which the user is currently typing, and the user ID is the ID of the other user who should receive the typing event. Okay, so let me just clarify that over here by the help of comment. So let me write this is the user ID. This user ID, I'm talking about this field user ID. This is the user ID of the other participant, of the other participant in the conversation, who should receive typing status. I hope this is clear. Okay, I'm actually trying to make it as easy as possible for you guys. Okay, so if you have any questions or doubts, just let me know in the comment section. Now after that, what we are going to do, we are going to first of all fetch this user with this ID. So here I'm going to write another comment, fetch the user by user ID. Okay, let me actually make this u small so that it's correctly matching this one. Okay, you don't have any confusion regarding this. Now here I'm going to write await, and then this will be user dot, and then I'll write find by ID. Okay, actually this is showing me this red squiggly line because I haven't marked this function as asynchronous, and I'm writing some I'm writing this await keyword inside of it. So let me just mark it as async. Now the error is gone. So here what we're going to do, as the name suggests, we are going to find the user document by the help of ID. So let's pass the user ID inside it. Okay, then in front of it I'm just going to write const user equals. Okay, now here we are going to actually check some conditions. So let me just check user. If we found the user and the user status is online, okay, so user status is online, and also user has a socket id as well. So user dot socket id. So let me actually take a moment to explain what is this condition. We are actually checking after finding the user document that if the user is not undefined, and also user has this status of online, and also user has a socket id, only when all these three conditions are matched, then we are going to emit the event to this user that the other user in the conversation is typing, okay, and they are going to see that typing indicator. And why I'm actually checking this condition, because just imagine a case when the other user in the conversation to which you are talking is currently offline, then there is no sense in displaying the typing indicator because the other user is not just there to see that. Okay, so this is a step which is introduced over here to optimize this. Okay, because we don't need want to send unnecessary data to the client side. Okay, so that is why here I'm just going to write const data to send. Okay. Now I'm just going to, send some data to that user to basically tell them, okay, in this conversation, the other user is typing and they will see the typing indicator. First of all, I want to send the conversation ID, and I also want to set the typing property to true. Okay. Now let's see how we need to, emit this event using the user socket ID. So in order to emit an event from the server to a given socket ID, we have to use this IO, which we are getting as the argument over here. So here on this IO, first of all, we need to call this true, and inside this true, we need to pass the socket ID to which we want to, send the event. And on this, we need to call the emit in order to emit the event. Then the event that I want to emit, that will be called start typing. This is the event name that we are basically firing from the server, and we'll be listening for the same event on our client side. And here we can just pass the data that we have already prepared over here. Okay, that is an object containing two properties. And this is how we are basically going to emit the event to the given socket ID. Now let me just write a comment over here. What we are doing over here, we are emitting the start start typing start typing event to the socket ID of the user. Okay, and in the else case, when this condition is not satisfied, okay, that means either the user is not found or the user is not online. So in that case, I'm just going to write a comment over here that user is offline. Okay, user is offline. Don't emit any event. Don't emit any event. I hope this is clear. So we are just going to add a log to the console. So let me just write console.log user with ID, and then let's write the user ID, which is our this one user ID is offline. Okay, that user is offline. So we are not emitting typing status. Okay, so this is our start typing handler. Now again the same thing, in order to use this function inside our socket server, we need to first of all export it from here. So let me write module dot exports equals start typing handler. Okay, now after this is created, I'm just going to copy this one, and let's create our stop typing handler. This is exactly going to be similar except few things that are going to change. First of all, the name is going to change from start to stop typing handler. Okay, so let's make that change in both the places. After that, we are going to actually receive the same kind of data from the client side, which is user ID and the conversation ID. Again, conversation ID is the conversation in which the typing is happening, and the user ID is the other user who should receive this typing status. Okay, now we are going to again check, find the user with their user ID from the user collection. Then we are checking the condition if we found the user or not. If we found the user, then status must be online and user must have a socket ID. If these three conditions are satisfied, then we are going to send the data. This time typing will be set to false. Then in order to emit the event, we are going to just again use the IO. Okay, once again. Then we have to call the to. Inside this, we need to pass the socket ID and then call the emit. This time the event name is also going to change. It will be stop typing, and then we are going to send this data that we have already prepared. And This else case is exactly going to be similar. There will be no change inside the else case. Okay. So I hope everything is clear till this point. So we have also created our start typing and stop typing handler. Now we can just go back to our socket server, and inside this socket.on start typing, where we are receiving the data, I can just go inside this callback. Okay, body of this callback. And over here, I'm just going to write start typing handler. Okay, this start typing handler is going to be imported from socket handler slash start typing handler.js. Okay. Now, after we imported that function, we need to call it. And here you can see we need to pass three things: socket, data, and IO. So let's pass the socket, then the data, which is this one, and then the IO, which is from here. Okay, top. So now we have also created this one. So let me mark it as done again. Okay, let's write done. Similarly, we are also going to, map our stop typing handler to this one. So let's write stop typing handler. This is also, imported correctly at the top. Please make sure you are importing all the handlers. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. Then inside this, again, we need to pass the three things, which is socket, data, and IO. So let's write socket instance, which is, coming from this IO.on connection socket. Then the data, which is coming from the client side inside this callback, and then the IO, which is created over here. Okay, now this is also done. So let's mark this one as done. Again, let me highlight this comment by adding this star at the two stars at the start. Then we are left with, creating these two handlers, which is for handling the new message and also handling the chat history. So this is also going to be very simple. Before that, let me actually check if there are any comments. Okay, so there are no questions in the comment section right now. So I'm just going to continue with the explanation. Let's create our, new get message history handler. So inside this handler, we are going to now send the user the history of the chat using the conversation ID. Okay, so let me again create a simple arrow function. I'm just going to write const chat history handler, chat history handler, and this is again going to be an asynchronous function because inside it we are going to run a query which is going to be asynchronous in nature. Over here we are going to receive two things: socket and the data. Okay, so inside this arrow function, what we are going to do, let's see. First of all, let me write the logic inside try catch block so that we can catch the error and handle it gracefully. So here I'm just going to get the error inside the catch block. Then inside this catch block, I'm just going to, first of all, let's write the comment what we are going to do. We are going to handle any errors. Let me write handle any errors and send error event back. Okay, and send error event back. So this is what we are going to do over here. Let me just, tell you how to emit the error. You just need to write socket.emit and write the error. This is going to be the event name for emitting errors. And inside the data, I'm just going to pass one property which is called message, which is, going to tell the client side what is happening on the server. So I'm just going to write failed to fetch chat history, failed to fetch chat history because here I'm passing the error as the second property inside this data. Okay. Now back inside this try block, what we are going to do, first of all, let's see what we are going to get from the client side. So when the client side is requesting us with the, chat history for any particular conversation, client is going to give us the conversation ID for which they want the chat history. So let me write what we are going to get from the client side. We are going to get the conversation ID. Now over here, I'm going to write const, and this will be our data that we get from the client side, which is this one. Okay. Now this data is going to be destructured and it's going to contain a field called conversation ID. Okay. Let me format the document. Okay. Let me format the document. And after that, I'm just going to write over here. After we have the conversation ID, first of all, let's console log it. Okay. So I actually add console logs in many places just to, see if everything is working. This is how we need to, debug our JavaScript applications. I always do it this way, and it's very, useful. Now let's see what we're going to do over here. After that, we are going to find the conversation by ID, find the conversation. Since we have the conversation ID, so obviously we can fetch the conversation document. So let me write find the conversation by ID and populate the messages. Okay, please remember that when we were creating our inside this user controller, when we were creating our start a conversation, get conversation, we were populating the conversation. Here you can see the message and participant. Similar thing is going to happen when we are inside our get message history handler. So when we are giving the client side with the messages, we are going to populate it and then send it. So here I'm just going to write await, and then here we are going to need the conversation model since we are running query over it. So you can see it's going to be imported from model slash conversation. Now it's auto imported at the top, you can see. So on this, I'm just going to run the query, which is find by ID. And since I already have the conversation ID, so I'm just going to pass it over here, conversation ID. And after that, I just want to, get the messages. So let's select the messages. I don't want to get the participants in this case. And then I'm going to populate the messages field. So let me write the correct method, populate. We always populate whenever there is, a reference. So it depends on you. You can also just get the IDs. But since I want the complete documents embedded, so I'm, calling this populate method. Now over here in front of it, I'm just going to write const conversation. Okay. And please note the difference between this conversation and this one. This is the model, and this is, a constant value, which is going to contain the return value of this query. Now, after we have the conversation, we need to check the condition in which case we are not, this conversation will be undefined. So if conversation is undefined, we need to send an event back to the client, which will be an error event. So let's write a return socket dot emit. Okay, and then here I'm just going to write error. The event name is error. And the message that I want to the message that I want to send to the client will be conversation conversation not found. Okay, this is the message that I'm going to give to the client, and this will be displayed on the UI if this error happens. Now the next thing is, if we don't get into this error, that means we found the conversation successfully. Then the next step is to prepare the response data. So let's write prepare the response data. Okay. So let me just create an object like this res data, which means response data. This will be an object. And what I want to send is the conversation ID so that the client can identify that, okay, this history of messages belong to this particular conversation. So here I'm just going to write conversation dot messages, not message, but messages. Please take care of this thing. If you just write message, that field doesn't even exist on conversation. Okay. So make sure you are writing things correctly. Otherwise, you'll see some error. Okay. Here, I'm going to again write a comment before writing the next line, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to emit the chat history back to the client, back to the same socket actually. So the socket which actually requested us to give the message history, and the socket also gave us this data that I want the message history for this conversation ID. We are going to give it back to that socket. Okay, so in order to emit an event back to the socket, we just need to call the emit method on the socket itself. So here I'm just going to write socket.emit, and the event name that we're going to basically emit from the server is chat history in this case. So we also need to listen for this event on our client side, which we'll see when we start integrating the API. So here the data which we need to send is this res data. So I'm just going to pass it as the second argument to this emit function. Okay. So now you see this chat history handler is now completed. This is the logic that we are going to use to get the message history and then send it back to the client. Also, in order to make use of it, we need to export it out of this file. So let me write module.exports equals, and then the name of function, which is chat history handler. I hope this is clear. Okay. Now back to our socket server.js file. Here, where we have written to do chat history handler, we are getting the data. Inside this data, we have the conversation ID. What we are going to do, we are going to call chat history handler, and to this we are going to pass two things. The first place we need to pass the socket, and in second place we need to pass the data. So let's write socket comma data. Okay. Now this is also done. So this is done. So I'm just going to, mark this as done again. So there is only one handler left to create, which is our new message handler. So what happens whenever we receive a new message? Okay, this is actually going to be pretty long because we have quite some logic inside this new message handler. So let me see if there are any questions in the comment section. Okay. So there are no questions in the comment section right now. So I'm just going to, end this stream over here. And in the next one, we just need to create our last handler, which is new message handler. After that, we are also going to make sure that everything is working correctly inside our server. I mean, we have, returned response from every controller at every place where it's needed and everything is handled properly. We are going to just, make a check for that, and after that we'll run our server in the next video for one time. Okay, after checking that, we are going to start integrating this server into our client side. So that's it for this particular live stream. I hope you enjoyed watching this one. Okay, and I'll see you in the next one after a very short break.